Welcome to The People I Play With. This is the show where I interview, well, the people I play with. I'm your host, Jesse Bernico. Today's guest is Greg Hellings. How are you doing, Greg?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. So, Greg and I know each other through a Los Angeles gaming meetup, and we both attend the local convention scene. Recently, we played a game of Fantasy for Real. But before we get into that, I want to talk about you as a player in general. I want you to tell me what you think your strong suit is as a player. What does Greg bring to the table?
That's a good one. I guess a fair amount of creativity. A lot of people do voices or they're super animated. I think mostly what I bring in are like ideas.
Would you say that you bring like a fresh perspective to whatever material is being played with?
I hope so. When I'm playing with other players, I generally am like trying to challenge myself with a role that isn't me. And try to figure that character out, and then help participate in making an interesting narrative.
Do you think there's anything that you could improve as a player?
Currently, one of my like big focuses is like helping to set up other players. I've noticed that the people I have the most fun with, and the people who are the most interesting to play with are the ones that are figuring out what my character needs or wants or interesting hooks, and then giving me this layup for some big character move. And I've been working at trying to develop as well.
I completely understand what you're talking about. So anyways, Fantasy for Real is a whimsical fairy tale taking place nowhere and no when. And after outlining where the events of play will take place, the GM asks the players to situate themselves in that environment. Then, based on what the characters are up to, the GM has them roll one of their skills, and depending on the outcome of that roll, their initial situation is either better or worse. Now, your character, Chev, was coming into a town in the bubbling swamp, looking for financial gain, and you failed your initial money roll. This led to the revelation that this town doesn't use money at all. They're an entirely barter economy. I'm curious, what sparked this focus on money as your primary motivation, and how did your perspective on that shift after this initial twist in the economic circumstances of the situation?
I think it was in the character generation. As I was going through, I was looking for how to play this character, and like making an older, scammy miser seemed right for the other choices I had made during character generation. And I feel like I doubled down once you said that like this was bartering society. I mean, he had the specific skill of money when it looked like that was going to be the road to like possible failure or the uphill battle. That made it more interesting to me.
Is it typical for you to find a motivation for your character that quickly based on character creation options?
It really depends on the game. I feel like a game that's got strong character development during character generation we're playing a one shot. This is not a super long character generation cycle. You're only selecting a handful of options. It has pretty evocative prompts in there that are going to push you in a direction. And in games like that, I find that and start going after it. Yeah.
Based on what you said before, once it was revealed that this town is entirely barter based, that thrust you into that financial motivation even more.
Yeah, I think conflict makes for the most interesting story. So when I see, hey, this is going to really rub in the wrong direction for this particular situation, that's probably going to create a really interesting story.
Well, one place where your character's negotiating talent shone was in brokering a deal between a sentient mushroom creature and Mother Moonbee. The primary tension was that the creature viewed Moonbee's medicinal mushroom garden as an exploitation of its people. Now, what was your thinking about resolving that tension? And was it purely self interest driven, or was there any sort of moral calculus behind it at all?
The other player I was playing with, their character was highly morally driven, and I knew that the both of us need to come to some kind of agreement. And so I think if there were some morals that played in there, it was to get agreement out of the other character. Whereas my character, I kind of saw him as being solely driven by profit.
Are you saying that the other character that you were playing with was acting as your character's conscience? Is that what I'm hearing?
I saw my character as seeing it beneficial to at least appear to have morals. He had some awareness where people's moral boundaries were. To get people to go along with him, he was going to have to operate inside this Overton window of moral boundaries. It just felt like the quickest way to get what he wanted.
Was there any kind of metagame considerations because the other player was playing a very zen sort of character and you were traveling together and you were in the scene together? Did you feel yourself sort of restrained by like, oh, I don't want to get into it too much with the other players?
No, I felt like conflict between my character and his character wouldn't yield an interesting outcome. It didn't feel like that would yield some interesting story beat. It would probably just kind of go nowhere. It felt like getting him to come along with what I wanted to do was going to lead in a more interesting direction. I don't think it was a meta gamey thing. To a certain extent, I like seek out failure while I'm playing these kinds of games. We rolled the dice a lot, and this game has a 50% failure rate. Rolling often wouldn't normally be in your metagamey favor. Uh, on the other side, I randomly came up very lucky in this game. I don't know what the actual statistics were, but I rolled successfully way more than 50% of the rolls.
I rarely ask about material we didn't play, but you did have an incredible run of luck on the dice during this negotiation between the mushroom creature and Mother Moonbee. Did you have any kind of contingency plan in your mind should either of those sides of the negotiations fall through?
To a certain extent, I was trying to push for failure because that's when interesting stuff happens. I think we still ended up having an interesting game. Normally, I'm driving towards taking the character right to some interesting cliff and then stepping off the edge a little bit to see what happens. And in this case, every single time I just ended up rolling another success.
It's also interesting to me that you didn't have any sort of like, okay, well, if this goes bad, this is what I'm going to do next. So it sounds like you're not much of a planner. It sounds like you kind of live in the moment with these things.
So occasionally I will lay groundwork for some kind of story beat or connection later with a character. Maybe some open-ended question that could have an interesting answer if we come back around to it. But I'm definitely not planning for success.
I wasn't even necessarily thinking about planning for success so much as going into a die roll, thinking if this goes bad, here's what I'm going to do. And it sounds like you don't necessarily have that one step ahead sort of thinking.
I think it depends on the character. In this case, the character I was playing, I had decided that he was just absolutely driven by greed and he had a real push your luck mentality. That doesn't seem to me like somebody who plans. They mostly just react. I think if I were playing a character who seemed more calculating, then I would be also calculating. But in this case, he was really driven by greed.
It sounds like your actual approach to playing the game is even informed by the type of character you happen to be playing.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of games are about a group of characters who are on a quest to get something, right? I'll accept that premise if that's what everybody at the table wants to do. I'm not going to spoil everyone's fun, but that's probably not the game I'm having the most fun in. And the kinds of games that I tend to enjoy the most are the ones that are either focused on player to player conflict or games in which we're failing miserably, during the game, and then having to react to those big story moments.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily thinking in terms of goal oriented when I'm playing a character. When I'm thinking of I'm going to have him do this, and if that doesn't go well, I think I have an idea of how he might follow that up. That to me doesn't change much based on like if the character's an idiot or the character's a genius. But it sounds like your relationship to even your decision making about a game shifts a bit depending on how the character is oriented.
And the game. That's the game everybody's agreed to play at the table, and I'm playing that way because that's what we've all agreed to play.
So let's talk about how things wound up. It eventually came to light that there was this goblin who was destroying these pipes that local farmers used to collect swamp gas. Now, he was doing this to get high on the gas. And he also had this magical instrument that caused anyone who tried to stop him to dance until exhaustion and drown. Another player ended up using a spell to take this instrument away. And then the mushroom creature showed up to drag the goblin underground. And that was actually part of the deal you had brokered with this creature. I believe you asked the goblin if he had anything to trade for his life, and he really didn't. So you let the mushroom creature drag the goblin away. So tell me, was this your idea of justice? Was it vengeance? Was it just more greed for Chev?
The other player character that I was playing with, we both had agreed to let this happen for different reasons. The other Zen-like character recognized that this particular character was going to go on creating harm, and so for the greater good, he allowed that to happen. And I think for my character, I just didn't care. He wasn't particularly profitable anymore. It seemed like there would be an advantage again for presenting a moral face. If I'd just let him go, he would have created more problems for my character. On balance, it just wasn't worth saving him.
How did the game resonate with you overall? Did it feel like did it feel kind of whimsical? Did it feel like a dark comedy? Like how did all of that together kind of make you ultimately feel about the narrative or your character?
This was a fairly whimsical game with a dark edge to it, which is tonally where my preference for games might end up. I don't feel like we ever got super serious during this game, but there was some moral conflict that had to kind of work through, figure out how our characters would react in those situations. I think that's kind of tonally where I found the game. It wasn't super dark. It was somewhat whimsical fantasy.
Given the opportunity, would you play Chev again? Did you like your character?
Yeah, he was fun. I would be curious to see where Chev might end up later. I definitely set up a lot of possible trouble for him in the future. There were a lot of interesting threads that could get pulled on.
I've been asking you all these questions. Do you have a question for me about this game we played?
Yeah. You had said that this game was designed as a way to help train someone to GM. If I were to present games like Apocalypse World, where the GM is set up as an asymmetrical player to the group, the GM is just another player. And then on a different end of the spectrum, if I took a game like Knave, where the GM is really set up as an arbiter, where they're more like a referee to deciding what can and can't happen. Then if I were to put a third point on the map where the GM is set up as a storyteller, where would you say that this game puts the role of the GM on that triangle?
I would say it's closer to the Apocalypse World end. Apocalypse World gives you very particular like principles and agendas. The text of fantasy for real is a little more directly practical in that it says this is your job in kind of like one succinct kind of section. It has rules for how to set up a situation, for example. I think a lot of the bigger rules are designed to declutter what the GM has to think about, right? And it definitely is about getting the GM into more of a reactive mindset to a developing situation. Half the roles are going to succeed, half the roles are going to fail. The magic system throws all kinds of chaos at you. And it says your job is to present this situation and to play the characters and then live in the moment with the players as much as possible, which to me is closer to the Apocalypse World end. If that is your territorial map. I'm always curious about people's recent gaming habits. You're part of that meetup that meets every other Monday, so you actually have a lot to draw on here when I ask this question. Do you have a favorite recent game memory?
Yeah, so we're just coming off of Game X, the con. That's where we played this game. I was in a large 8-person game of Going for Broke, which I think is like a near perfect game design. This was my 4th time at a table with this game, and I finally hit the absolute perfect table for this game in this moment. There's a bunch of people all on the same page of exactly the kind of game they wanted, and it just gelled really well with this game design.
Was there any sort of standout moment to you from a fictional perspective that was like, we have achieved peak Going for Broke?
The thing about this kind of comedy, out of context, none of it's going to seem that funny. You needed the whole contextual moment to be there, but there was a random character who was just about to be apprehended by some security guards, and in the particular moment of the game that couldn't happen. We needed to wrap things up, and he says, "Oh, I got it. Pocket sand." And it was just so random. It was so fitting with his character. It has all rolling.
A lot of role-playing games in general almost have that problem where it's so personal to you and the group that it's like, oh, you had to have been there to really get it. Um, so last question. Is there a game you haven't had a chance to play that you really want to?
Realis.
What's Realis about?
It just has really interesting mechanics. It's kind of space opera-y, but the mechanic that I find so interesting here is you don't roll. You have narrative statements that make up the class for your character. And whenever you want to do something, you can rely on one of these narrative statements. You have to map this narrative statement to the thing that you want to do in this moment. And then when you come into conflict with somebody, they also have narrative statements. And each narrative statement has a weight. Whichever narrative statement weighs more wins.
Yeah, that does sound interesting. Let me know if you organize a game. I'd be happy to play. Well, thank you for being one of the people I play with and for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to The People I Play With.
Please join me in 2 weeks when I interview Kyle Wolf about playing all sides of 17th century Avignon in Story Engine.